Hi guys. I feel very nervous, okay? I have not I've been away, okay? I took an unannounced, unintentional hiatus. And I believe in being honest with you guys. I'm gonna be 100% real. I crashed out multiple times. I feel like that's been the theme of my life, basically disappearing off the face of the earth and coming back and be like, "Hey guys," and everybody's like, "Wait, where did you go?" And I'm like, "Well, I've just sequentially been crashing out. That's where I've been." But in all honesty, I was originally coming into this podcast episode being like, "I'm so sorry, I haven't uploaded in a month. I know I had described and promoted this whole amazing summer school series and I didn't upload anything." And then I went and looked back and I was like, actually, I uploaded 3 videos. I know I was supposed to upload 8, but nonetheless, I was like, actually, I did. August has felt like it's been 3 years long. And I'm not one of those people that feel like time moves fast for them, but I never feel like time moves unbearably slow. Time just moves at the same speed for me. I've never been feeling like, oh my God, that went by so fast. You know, when people are like, oh, secondary school went by so fast. No, it didn't. Like, that was 5 years of my life. I felt like it was 5 years of my life. I had collected 5 years worth of experiences. University, and people like, it went by so fast. Again, no, it didn't. It felt like 3 years of my life. I collected 3 years, probably a lifetime, actually, worth of experiences and trauma. And I don't know if it's because I'm a deeply reflective person, because one thing that I have repeatedly received commentary about this entire month has been, Jessie, you think too much and you have an opinion on everything and you think way too deeply. So maybe that's just the case, that I've just been able to wring out like literally every micro experience I've ever had, like a dishcloth. And that's why I'm just like, yeah, no, I've experienced that quite well. But is it because I actually have experienced that, or I have fought it and turned it over so many times in my brain that I have just embedded that experience into my consciousness, so it just feels like an appropriate amount of time? I don't know. Anyway, needless to say, I failed. Okay. Actually, you know what? A fun start to this episode. Let's actually take stock on everything that I failed at this year. Okay. Because the whole point of this episode is because I was pondering after my most recent crash out last week. I was like, I'm so sick and tired of crashing out every time that I fail. And every time that I mess up and I fuck up and I do something, or I don't meet my expectations, or I don't meet somebody else's expectations, and that for some reason severely cripples me. I'm sick and tired of it. So I went on this massive deep dive on how can I be a better failure? Or how can I be better at failing? So this is the direction we're going. But let me give you some microcosm examples of little tiny ways where I fucked up. I think, kind of like, when you're in an AA meeting, I've never been in an AA meeting, although you would argue in my first and second year of uni, I should have been in AA meetings. But I've never been in an AA meeting. But you know how like they go around and like, hi, my name is Jessie and I am an alcoholic, and they just kind of share their experiences to the circle so everybody feels very comfortable and safe. That is what I'm essentially doing. I'm priming your brain to feel trusted and safe with me before we go into this ultimately life-defining topic in the female genius manner. So first things first, very obvious, I said I was going to upload podcast episodes. I didn't do that. I don't know why. I think obviously I crashed out, but then also I felt like I was losing myself. Okay. I really want this podcast to do well. And that is a realization that I have come to in recent months. Before it was just like, yeah, hobby, peace sign. And now it's just like, actually, I love it. And I really, really think that some of the things I say, and I think I have the gift of the gab. Okay. Not to toot my own horn, but I think I do. And so I think I put a lot of pressure on myself, is like, how do I make it, or how do I curate episodes that are as marketable and have this level of virality? I ultimately fell into that trap, weirdly enough. And I was listening back to some episodes, and then I was listening back to old episodes. I was like, wow, Jessie, you sound like you have a gun to your head. You sound like you're not having fun. That's not to say the last episodes, there's no merit and value in them, because some of them I'm like, yeah, juicy. But I don't know, there's a lack of playfulness in this episode. And I remember talking to someone, don't worry, we'll get to the point in a second. I remember talking to somebody, and they're like, oh, describe to me what your podcast is about. And I was like, it feels like a late night FaceTime with your science obsessed friend where you go away with lots of things to think about and have had a really great time laughing and you have learned a lot. That's kind of what I describe it. And I was actually, when I listen back to those recent episodes, maybe it's because I'm filming in daylight, I was like, okay, it doesn't have that same je ne sais quoi. So yeah, that's something I failed at. Number 2, my nails. Oh my God, please don't zoom in. And now I've brought attention to them. Guys, I have had this biting nail habit since the dawn of time, okay? Like, ever since they weaned me off that dummy, my nail, I don't know what it is. I don't want to say it's stimming because I have not been officially diagnosed with autism. I do have ADHD. Do people with ADHD stim? I don't know, but I do it when I'm thinking. Like, it's never an anxiety thing. It's never because I'm freaking out. It's just usually that while I'm doing certain things, while I'm thinking, while my brain is like, when my body is stagnant, something needs to be moving. And this is just, it's a very satisfying action. I don't know. And so one of my goals was stop biting it because I can't afford to get, I can say I can't afford. I don't want to get acrylics every single time. They're so damaging to the nail. They're so inconvenient because every time I go to the nail shop and I'm like, I don't want them long, they still do them long. Like, it's like I'm paying you and they're like, I'm not listening to you. And so it makes it harder to like play piano, which is another one of my goals that I've messed up because I also wanted to learn how to play at least 3 to 4 piano songs by this point in the year. I've learned like 20 seconds of one. Am I dreaming? I just wanted to be a lot better and kind of get back to where I was like pre-uni in terms of piano skills. And I've just not. I started learning British Sign Language. Nice to meet you. And I forgot I'd started doing that. And so I flopped on that. My gym, so inconsistent. Yeah, those are the ones that are currently haunting my spirit at the moment. But needless to say, the whole point of today's episode is I have given you a stock of all of my failures and things that I have wanted to complete and did not accomplish and everything. And major crash out last week. I was just like, I'm so done. And then I was like, actually, wait a minute. I just think I'm going about it in the wrong way. And today, geniuses, through my very in-depth, very observation research, I've kind of done a lot of perspective searching and thinking through various different lenses on how to fail like a genius. Because failure, unfortunately, is an inevitable part of life. And so I began to probe and question through different formats and in my own brain and in my own friendship circles. Like, what does it look like to fail in a way that's not destructive to your being? And that is the theme and the essence of today's episode. So welcome back, geniuses. I know you missed me. Welcome to the Female Genius Podcast.
Female Genius.
So, unfortunately, although hopefully by the end of this podcast, you'll be saying fortunately, making mistakes is a foundational part of our existence as human beings and is a very important part in every story and most systems in terms of development of the system. Very, very few biological systems, chemical systems, and even fictional systems are able to operate without making mistakes and correcting them in different pathways. So let's look at some biological examples, my little geniuses, as to how this makes sense. So for example, when we are learning skills in our brain, our motor learning or our development of motor skills, this could be learning how to walk, this could be learning how to do a handstand. But in this example, I'm going to talk about hitting a tennis ball with a tennis racket, okay? When we want to hit a tennis ball with a tennis racket, we swing and we hope that the tennis racket, because of the movement and the position of our body, is going to hit it when we think it's going to hit it, right? But we have a part of our brain called the cerebellum. And when we attempt to go and swing the tennis racket and we miss the tennis ball, maybe because of our body positioning or the way we're holding the racket, and the actual movement differs from the intended movement, right? A signal sends through climbing fibers or different nervous impulses sends from your muscles to your cerebellum to say, hey, we messed up. That's not doing what we wanted it to do. Right? This doesn't mean that your cerebellum and your motor system falls apart and dies. And this doesn't mean that it's like, okay, we're never going to pick up a tennis racket again. What it does is that it's like, okay, so clearly that positioning doesn't work. So let's try a little bit of this and see if that works instead. And so through refinement and correction from making mistakes, the cerebellum is able to refine and embed and perfect that movement in your brain. And so you then are on your way to becoming the next Serena Williams. And that applies to very many motor skills, even from learning the piano, the thing that has been plaguing my mind for ages. when we are learning to play the piano, right, if you hit a note that your brain is like, actually, that's not the note that we intended to play, okay, your cerebellum then kicks in, because playing piano is an integration of both motor and auditory skills and like hand-eye coordination. You're going to move your hand slightly, so you are hitting the movement and hitting the note that you are expected to hit, right? This is all through making a mistake allows you to perfect and refine and embed those skills into your brain. Another example is, for example, stomatal regulation in plants, right? Let's throw back to GCSE biology. Stomata are those small, tiny pores on the surface of a leaf, which allows gases to enter and exit the plant. And so in periods of high water stress, or in situations where the plant's feeling a little dry, doesn't have a lot of water, and is losing a lot of water as water vapor from the stomatal pores, right, the plant is able to detect this, and it's like, hey, we're losing way more water than we want to, and this could cause many problems. Okay, this is not good. We're not liking this, right? And a chemical known as abscisic acid, or ABA for short, is secreted into the guard cells, which causes the stomatal pores to close. I think I described that quite well, right? And so again, it's the error in the system. There is not enough water that kicks or starts the process to allow that system to be corrected. Biological systems, from plants to our own bodies to animals across the world to entire ecosystems, are designed to be anti-fragile, right? Allowing us to improve on a task upon failure instead of just falling apart, right? It all depends on making a mistake, and rather than the entire system falling apart, becoming better from having made that mistakes. And whilst these systems aren't always perfect, it shows a natural evolutionary tendency towards growth. But sometimes we can get so bogged down in the mistake itself, right? As human beings, we have very intense psychologies, and we're like, oh my God, I can't believe I made the mistake. I can't believe I've done that. That could be an inhibitor to the growth that mistake was intended to have on you as a person, as a system, as the world as an entity, as an ecosystem, and all of these different things. We can often look to stories and tales told across different mediums, okay, to tell us and to learn about the importance of failure. I cannot lie to you. I really wrapped my brain to think about any story or movie I have watched where the character or the main character or any character has not fucked up once, but that fuck up has taught them a very important lesson that has allowed them to subsequently become closer and to achieve their goal. And when we look at different storytelling, how would I put it? Tropes, right? Very traditional things that we tend to see. We can often look towards the Greeks. I have a very specific hyperfixation with the Greeks at the moment. I don't know, with the ancient Greeks. I don't know why. I think it's because I started playing like a choices game, where those Greek characters, and then my hyperfixation of the month. Such a side note, sorry. If you're new here, this is our ADHD sidebar, and I started to pick one thing a month to like hyperfixate on, do lots of research, watch lots of YouTube videos, read a book if I choose to do so, watch documentaries if I choose to do so. And it's currently right now matriarchies, but even though the ancient Greeks weren't a matriarchy, it's now led me down the tumble world that I'm just basically studying the ancient Greeks. And one thing that came up in my studies, which feels very aligned with today's episode, is this notion of the classic hero's tale. And so Joseph Campbell, in a paper, in a book, an article, basically theorizes, and through analyzing lots and lots of different Greek myths and Greek stories, right, from different Greek heroes, from Heracles to Odysseus, he basically comes up with very, very specific arcs or acts that the story needs to hit in order for it to be aligned with the hero's tale. And actually, in a lot of our modern retellings of stories or modern creative characters, we still follow that trope unintentionally. We expect that trope when we're looking towards superheroes or, you know, typical fantasy main characters. And so kind of think about it like, if you remember like primary school, you'd have the story mountain. So you have like the beginning, you know, rising tension, peak, descending tension, and it's kind of like that but a little bit more detailed. So for example, like I think the first act is always like divine parentage / a blessing. So either the hero discovers, hey, one of my parents is a god, I'm not like the rest of you mere mortals, or he receives a blessing. I say he because most of the time it is a he receives a blessing from a god. Is like one of those two typically. But let me show you how it can reflect to a modern story. Spider-Man, Peter Parker, right? He might not have divine parentage, but he gets bitten by a radioactive spider and therefore gains the powers, allowing him to be Spider-Man. The first act of this tale of the hero Spider-Man is quote unquote a blessing, which allows him to either gain certain powers or sets him apart from the rest of the people in the world or in his like little universe. But one very, very important and very interesting for the sake of this episode character or trope or act that is super important and almost essential is the trials and tribulation acts. Every hero's tale requires the hero to go through trials and tribulations. Okay. And this is very important because, right, the trials and testing is when the series of tests that a character or our hero undergoes allows them to develop characteristics and prove themselves as worthy of what something or the Greeks would call kleos. Now, kleos is kind of hard to, as most translation is, because English is such a flawed language. And again, I'm not a linguist at all, but I've tried my best. Kleos directly translates into what is heard or to hear. And so kleos isn't necessarily like the hero proving himself worthy of glory in the sense of riches and wealth and, you know, lots of women and living in the lap of luxury. But it's more about proving himself to be worthy of being heard of, right? Or being spoken of and remembered. And this can typically be external, is this idea of being immortalized in myth and being immortalized in people talking about you and remembering you and using your name in analogies and being written and having stars named after you. That is what was truly the hero's reward at the end of his journey. This idea of forever being immortalized, especially heroes that were mortals or originally mortals. I mean, if you look at the Disney movie of Hercules, like his whole thing is that he wants to become immortal so he can go live with his family. He wants to go live with the gods. And his whole journey of becoming a hero and going through and being all of those monsters and proving himself through various tests is to prove himself of being worthy of being immortal, of being a god. That's not always saying that the role is of being a god, but it's to be immortalized, whether it's through word or thought or spoken language or songs or poems or stories or literally becoming a god. And what we typically find, though, is that the Greeks in their myths and their stories would typically externalize conflicts through the hero's confrontations with different monsters, temptations, and various ordeals. So through monsters, the monsters would almost act as a metaphor or what people in their everyday life might experience. Almost like these Greek myths served as parables rather than just amazing, sprawling retellings of what could be considered to some as religious text. Right, for example, in the Odyssey, Odysseus faces off with sirens. Sirens, if you're unaware, are these beautiful, super duper dangerous mermaid-like creatures. And they just, you know, they have this very haunting song that basically lulls sailors right off their ship to go join them in like the midst of their lust and pleasure, and then after lulling them off the ship they eat them. Okay, and so in his Odyssey, Odysseus confronts and ends up interacting with sirens, and to prevent himself from falling into temptation of the siren song, he ties himself to a pole on the ship to prevent himself from lolling forward. And this, why it can, okay, they are literally talking about sirens, but some could argue that the sirens are a metaphor for succumbing to lust and pleasure. And the fact that Odysseus was to use his wisdom and his intelligence to figure out a way out of this proves himself a little bit more worthy of kleos. Odysseus also undergoes many different trials that he fails at, but it teaches him how to become a more fair, a more weathered, and a more clear leader. For example, there was guys, I have not read the Odyssey, but I have listened to the musical. I'm not laughing. I shouldn't laugh at my lack of knowledge of these things, but I think I'm fascinated with the Greeks at the moment because I have such weird sources of knowledge that I just want to make sure that I'm getting it right. But you know the song where he goes, "When does a planet become a meteor? When does a comet become a..." Guys, you need to listen to it. It's like a concept album. What is it called? The Odyssey. Guys, I'll link it down below because you guys, it's magical. It's amazing. Like a guy on TikTok, literally, I think during lockdown, got a bunch of different singers on TikTok and he built this story and this album from scratch. I'm in awe of his talent and everybody on the thing. But there was like one time where he made a bad decision and it caused basically half of his soldiers to get killed. And he was like, right, so I need to toughen up. I need to learn a lesson. And through that trial and tribulation, unfortunately, though he failed and he lost many, many lives in the process, it allowed him to learn a lesson and become a better leader.
Female genius.
There are many different examples that I can pick in shows. For example, Spider-Man. It's always a great example. That man, in every story, comic, movie, that man goes through it. But he then begins to learn. For example, if we look at Spider-Man No Way Home, and obviously we have Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man come in, and Zendaya, MJ, falls off the building. But through, unfortunately, Gwen dying in his universe and how he didn't save her properly, he has now learned from that mistake and now that failure. Actually, this is probably a safer way to save people from falling, to prevent them from dying. And although it hurts because he can never recover back what he's lost, is now allowed him to have a lesson that allows him to save people going forward. I mean, if you think about Kung Fu Panda, oh my word. Okay. I need to think of like a normal version. Like, I feel like all of my examples just lean a little bit too, but I feel like everybody's watched a Spider-Man, everybody's watched Kung Fu Panda. But the tale of Po from Kung Fu Panda is like a very good representation of how different trials and tribulations strengthen the warrior inside, per se, in our example, and allows him to become closer and closer to this idealized or the best version of the dragon warrior that he can be. I mean, we meet Po, and he's this overweight, food-loving panda, and he dreams of becoming a kung fu master, but is regularly dismissed because of not only of his disposition, but, you know, he's always supposed to work in this noodle shop. That's his goal, you know, that's his father's dream. Come on, Po, pat on that big fat belly, it's not going to be you. Surprisingly, he accidentally falls into an arena where they're trying to decide who the next dragon warrior is, and Master Ugo is like, actually, wait a minute, the spirits are telling me, divine blessing, act 1, it's you. It's you, divine calling. And so through his training, through confronting his laziness, through realizing, actually, you know what, I need to build my strength, and this is going to require hard work, through failing at many fights and sequences and losing people that he cares about and love, he then, throughout the course of the movie, becomes closer and closer to becoming the perfected version of the Dragon Warrior. Not to say that he lost himself on the process. I mean, that Skadoosh will forever be legendary. But it's saying that through those trials, he has allowed himself to refine those parts of him that needed refinement, per se. If we look towards some philosophers' perspectives on failures, they actually all kind of tend to have similar agreements, which is very rare in the school of thought or philosophy. A lot of philosophers, right, from the existentialists to the Stoics, believe that failure is unfortunately a very inevitable part of life. Okay, it is something that is unavoidable and it's outside of our control. But the only thing that we can alter and change within our control is our response to failures. I mean, if we look towards the Stoics didn't believe that failure was inherently good or bad. They couldn't describe, hey, this specific piece of failure is a bad thing. The act of failing in itself, it's not negative or positive. However, the response to said failure can be positive or negative, right? This comes from the notion that a lot of the Stoics believe that there are certain things that are outside of our control. And if we hyperfixate on the things that are outside our locus of control, we will drive ourselves nuts. And the best way to live our life is to focus on the things that we can control. So there are some things in failure, like losing your job, losing money, right? And although to some degree you can argue that there are things that we could do to influence them, but we cannot go to our dream company and force it and make sure that it happens, right, so that we can get said job. But what you can do, which is within your control, of getting fired from a job or not getting the job that you want, is to either upskill yourself or continue applying to the job so you are better put in position to get it. Do you kind of see what I mean? Is the response to failure that is super duper important. One thing I actually do really want to touch upon, which I really think is interesting and has been a very constant thought in my head, is this idea of the burden of potential and this fear that one might have of failure. And let me level with you guys. Let me be honest. In our AA meeting, or FF meeting, FA, Failures Anonymous, last year, as I've said multiple times across the podcast, it has genuinely left an imprint on my soul. I didn't get the grade I want after working myself to absolutely to the bone. When I tell you, I was absolutely distraught and destroyed many aspects of myself in an attempt to pursue a certain grade at the end of university, and I did not get it. And when I tell you, it developed this extreme intense fear of failure in me that I did not realize and confront until very, like, probably around April of this year. And I didn't realize it because many times and many points in my life, like I've messed up on an exam, I haven't got what I wanted. And I'm just like, okay, like my response to it is always, okay, like let's bounce back, let's work harder kind of thing. But it was one of those things where it was a failure that I could not correct. And the lesson I initially took from that failure, which I would argue is very bad, is it actually doesn't matter how hard you work. Like nothing is promised in life. So I might as well just not work hard. And I might as well just not care about anything. So I started this podcast because it was fun, but I didn't set any goals for the podcast. I didn't want to set goals out of fear that I would not achieve said goals. I was very blasé about it. I wouldn't apply to any jobs out of fear of not getting the jobs. I would not ask anybody for help out of fear of getting or being refused help per se. And so this notion of this fear of failure literally haunted me in the back of my head. I'd see something and I think it's cool and I'd be like, wait, but like I could apply and not get in. You know, I could come up with this amazing, great concept idea for a podcast episode and be like, people could laugh at me and it could really flop. So we're not going to do it. And the motivation and that mindset of like, wait a minute, don't do that, just was never like, it wasn't a voice in my brain like that. Internal voice that used to be there being like, but we can kickstart it, like let's pivot, it just completely disappeared. It died in my third year of uni and I buried it when I got that grade and I was like, right, so I'm done here. I never want to do anything again. And it's a very interesting place to be, and it's a very interesting response because I don't think it's coming from a place of never having had failed. I think it was coming from a place of I have not met. Am I gonna start getting emotional? Whoa. I have like so many people think so highly of me. And it was so painful because like people would come up to me, be like, congratulations on graduating. Didn't you get a first? Like, oh my God, like I know you, Jessie. You're so smart. I'm sure you got like a first and like 8. Like, do you get like all of these different things? And it's like actually it was less even about this idea of failing, but actually having to confront and tell people that actually I had failed. And it was this idea of not meeting this potential that had been put on a pedestal my entire life. Like, Jessie, these are the heights that you have to achieve. And I subconsciously just really put that pressure on myself that really crippled me to the point of I just don't want to tell anybody I failed because I would rather not meet that potential than try and then fall and like break my leg in the process. I remember I was sitting with Evelyn. She came on the podcast. She did a whole episode on, figuring out what your purpose is and like making those kind of decisions. You guys should go check it out because it's an amazing episode. But I remember I sat down with Evelyn last year, September, and she was walking me through, because she's a genius, she was walking me through like a certain process. And she was like, okay, you're just going to repeat this word to me 3 times. And it's just like, okay, like, you're just like, it's like saying it to a mirror. And it was like, okay, I didn't get the grade I want. Didn't get the grade I want. No emotional attachment to it. And then it was like, okay, now you're going to imagine that I am the people that you've met across time in uni. Maybe it's like some of you uni friends, maybe it's the people on your course. Now you're going to say is, I didn't get onto the master's program I wanted with you guys, but I'm really happy for you. And that broke me apart. It was this idea of telling people that I hadn't met that expectation. And I felt like I had failed. That crippled me in the process. And so I really, really wanted to talk about the burden of expectation. I mean, even in my crash out, the great crash out of August 2025 that I keep referencing, I wrote in my journal, this is how personal I'm getting, guys. I'm reading in my journal. I wrote, and I had recently finished reading The Belger in August. So maybe that's why I'm catastrophizing, right? But I kind of wrote a little bit about, where am I? So Sylvia Plath wrote about her inability to pursue a passion using the ever-popular analogy of a fig tree. She recounts like a prophet that she sees herself staring at a fig tree with the figs representing her various futures and passions. Unable to decide on a fig as she aged, she watched as each fig began to rot and eventually fell from the tree until the tree stood barren. The ultimate parable was because she could not settle, she could not become. Following this, she subsequently fell into a deep depression for many years until eventually the ghost of her unfulfilled potential haunted her to the point of insert death. And I wrote, is that my destined path to be another warning, a bright star that eventually made an inevitable fall from the sky? I then was talking about how I felt really hollow and how I don't feel any excitement for my future and any life. And I think ultimately the notion was that I was burdened to the point of what I wanted for myself as a kid and like that future potential, and the fear of failing and not achieving that crippled me to inaction. And I mean, a really great analogy and a really great lesson to take from this I learned from reading Kafka, ironically. And Kafka in the book Before the Law has this almost parable like allegory of something called the trial. And in this story, a man from this random country seeks access to something known in this book or in the story as the law, which some people argue acts as like a metaphor for the ultimate meaning or purpose in life. And so there is a gatekeeper that initially blocks his path and says it's possible, but not now. And the man looks inside and like sees like there's many other gates and like sees very powerful figures guarding the gates. And he looks at the guy, this is the gatekeeper, and he's like, okay, let me wait. So he sits down by the gate and waits, and he waits for days, and days become months, and months become years, and then he ends up waiting by the gate his whole life. From time to time, every few years or so, he tries to persuade the guard to give him permission to enter, even offering his belongings as bribes. But the guard accepts them, but does not notion for him to enter. The man, eventually nearing death, asks the gatekeeper, after all these years, why did no one else come to try and seek access to this law? Like, why did no one try to seek access to this gate? And the gatekeeper said that this door was only meant for you in your life, right? Now I am going to shut it. And the man could have tried to go in, but he didn't. And he spent his whole life waiting and seeking permission rather than going for it regardless. And I ultimately think that this story is an allegory for how the fear of failing can paralyze us from fulfilling our own unique potential. And throughout this whole podcast episode, and I hope throughout all of these examples, from the biological systems to the stories about how trials and tribulations are essential to the hero's journey and to the fruition of Kleos, or ultimate purpose and ultimate goal, and how it allowed Odysseus to become a better leader, and allowed Spider-Man to become a better hero, and allowed Kung Fu Panda Po to become a better dragon warrior. I hope through all of these examples, you can only fail by, trying is failure by omission, okay? If you do not give yourself the ability to try, you are failing regardless. And you will learn nothing because you have not tried. If you try something and you fail, you are ultimately never leaving without something. You have gained lessons, you have refined, you can grow, you can allow yourself, like many biological systems that keep you and I alive, to develop and grow and, refine certain aspects of yourself. But not trying leaves you with nothing. You gain absolutely nothing. Take it from me as somebody who the fear of failure ultimately crippled them for so many months and ultimately like a year of my life. There was nothing I gained from not allowing myself to try. Nothing. I can't even say I gained a good lesson from it. There was nothing. I can't even say I didn't even try because I was like nothing. I didn't try because I was too scared. There was no reward, right? There is no medal given to those who, don't even make it to the start of the track. There is no participation medal. There's nothing. You gain nothing. Okay. And ultimately, I think about this as like, what is the point of, living a life where I can't even take an experience away from it? Yes, I might run the race and I might not finish first. I might not finish second. I might not hit the podium. Bro, I might only walk 2 meters and like crack my leg, right? So now I have to go heal for like a year. But ultimately, I got there and I started that race. And my lesson is, okay, next time, let's not run in Crocs. And I've at least taken something away from that lesson. I don't know if you watched the Olympics last year, but there was like so many times where first of all, I think it's crazy, like after somebody has come last place and they're crying in tears and the cameraman's like, so tell us how you feel about that failure. But actually, when you watched it, you will see them and these athletes are like, it sucks. It really burns me inside. I mean, it hurts. It hurts so bad, especially those athletes who came back from gold medals. These gold medal athletes are like, wow, I really hit the bottom. Like, wow. But they're like, but you know what? Everything's a learning experience. I'm going to try. I'm going to rebound. I'm going to keep going, And so from this crash out and from reading these stories, from deeply reflecting on the heroes that I beloved from DC and Marvel and the fiction stories I've read, from Olympians to musicians, right? There is always something to be gained by trying. There is nothing to be gained by not trying. And your fear of failure will continue to cripple you and not allow you to not experience life. That is to say, please be safe. Don't do anything stupid, right? Within reason. But if there's something you really, 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 really want, allow yourself, position yourself to be better at getting it. And you might not get it now, like the gatekeeper in the story, but that doesn't mean you should never ask again. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try again, right? Be the person that gives yourself permission to enter certain spaces.
Female genius.
I don't want you to take this episode as a promise that you will never fail. Or if you continue trying, right, you will eventually get what you want. I can't promise that, okay? But what I can promise you is that every failure in life will teach you something, okay? And it will teach you where your strengths lie and where your weaknesses are. It will tell you, okay, maybe I need to focus on this, and maybe I don't need to focus on this. It might teach you, hey, maybe I need to pivot. Like maybe this isn't where my strength lies. And it's like, I can promise you every failure will allow you to take away a lesson. Me not getting the grade I want crippled me inside. But the lesson is actually inherently wasn't that work yourself to the bone and you'll get what you want in life. Because clearly I worked myself to the bone and I didn't get it. But the lesson was actually, I fell apart afterwards. And it's like, actually, I shouldn't define my self-worth by something like that. And inherently, what can I define my self-worth by? Something that isn't as fleeting. What can I develop? What do I love, right? That even if I was to fail, I would have been happy of trying. Because I was so pissed because I hated chemistry by the end of the year. I was like, damn, like really messed up and I did this stupid course. But yeah, nonetheless. And so to end this episode, I obviously have given you hopefully some motivation, some and some finger clicks and some clackets. But I actually want to give some more practical advice that I think has helped me work through certain failures in my life, last week's crash out, but other bigger ones in my life as well. I'm going to go from small to quite big. Very, very small. I have a Spotify playlist that's like, don't give up. And I play it sometimes, like it'll be like third day in bed, lazy, crashing out, nothing is worth it. I'm like, you know what? There's zero energy to just play a song. And it's like the first song that's thing is like, Am I Dreaming? The playlist is Am I Dreaming? And it's like, and I'm like, yeah. And like having playlists of like really motivate, they typically tend to be from movies. So that was from Spider-Verse. I think there's a lot of Spider-Verse on that playlist, but like New Woman by Rosalia and Lisa, like just songs that like remind me actually, you know what, okay, maybe I have not gone to the gym in a year, I will go tomorrow. Maybe I have not uploaded a podcast episode, maybe I have 0 subscribers, maybe there's no point in this, maybe my camera's broken. Let's film an episode. I don't know. There's something about listening to music that just kickstarts. I've been reading a lot, actually. Sorry, ADHD sidebar, on like the brain on music. And I know I did a whole other episode. I think that was like my third episode ever on this podcast, was talking about, the psychology, the neuropsychology of music. But that is something that has been another passion because I'm reading Understanding the Brain on Music by Daniel Levitin. And it's so interesting. But music is such a powerful force. And so making a playlist that's going to get you, thingy. Number 2, share your failures. And it doesn't have to be online. I feel like sometimes people can be like, I'm going to share, like that can be quite intimidating. But I think sometimes when you guard them and you're like, I don't want anybody to know that I never did it. I don't want anybody to know that I'm not the gym person they thought I was. Sometimes with somebody that you really trust, having that open dialogue of actually, I know I present like I'm going to the gym every single, I don't know why I'm using gym as my analogy but like I'm actually going to be honest with you, I haven't been like 3 months and it's kind of fallen apart, and having that person you can talk through the failure with can sometimes help you see what lessons you can learn. And it could be like, okay, you're squatting wrong and now your knee is fucked, and that's why it's hard for you to get up every morning in the gym, because there's intense pain shooting up your knee. Like sharing those moments with people that you trust in your life, it can be so powerful and so helpful and like make you see things from such a different perspective. Playlist, failures, start sharing them. Don't be embarrassed. And then this whole weight of a failure, failures then start to become a little bit smaller when you share them. They don't weigh on your conscious as much. They don't become these things to be hidden and stuck under the table, but they become aspects and very vital parts of your growth and development as a human being. 3rd, journal. I'm a journaling babe. Sometimes we lack the inability to see clearly our thought patterns and processes. And a lot of time we can fall into this self-fulfilling trap and this hauntingness when You just, you just don't interact with your thoughts. Journaling allows and provides this ability to reflect a little bit deeper on your thought patterns. Like after that whole journaling session I did last week, and then I read it back 2 days later, post crash out, I was like, oh, this is not a healthy way to think about failure. This is quite destructive. And then I would go back and read past journal entries. I was like, wow, okay, clearly I don't know how to cope with this very well. Let's do some research. And so journaling has allowed me to recognize thought patterns in this. Number 4 is you have to clearly define what success means to you. The world is so loud. It's messy and it's noisy. And so many people are shouting about their accomplishments and what they have succeeded in. And that's amazing. Go ahead, shout, girl. You've worked for it. But what I will say is that sometimes other people's definition of success can become muddied and blended into our own unintentionally. And so then we start to absorb or compare or realize like, actually, oh my God, I am now defining this thing as a failure by somebody else's metric of success. And it's like, actually, why the hell am I doing that? It's not even a source of inspiration or motivation anymore. It's now corrupted my own thinking and thought process. If my goal is to learn piano and to master a song on piano, and then I have gone online and seen that the current trend is bass guitar, and I'm like, damn, I'm such a failure because I don't know how to play bass guitar. That doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. That's not a goal I had. That's not a goal I put in my brain. Like, it's really random, super random. Like, why the hell I would ever do that? And so now it's like, okay, what? And so now it's like, okay, let's flip it. Let's flip it, because realistically my goal was to learn piano, to never learn bass guitar. But now I'm measuring somebody and my ability to play bass guitar, and like I'm now defined what success in this realm of music is to me by somebody else's metric. That's what some people are doing, and I don't think they realize it. I did it too, actually, and I do it quite often. I'm measuring myself by somebody else's standards of success, and being able to define what success looks like for you does take time, and it will change and iterate over the course of your life. But just getting a little bit clearer about actually what this, from even start on a day level, what do I need to do today to make me feel accomplished at the end of the day? And then if you don't do that thing, it's not a response of, damn, I'm such a horrible I'm so terrible, blah, 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 blah. I'm so distraught. I need to go into a hole in my room and never speak to anybody again because I'm not worthy of it, because I had 1 cup of coffee when I said I would have 0. The response is, okay, so how do I make sure tomorrow I have 0 cups of coffee? Is it I get rid of my coffee machine? Okay. Is it that I walk past a different way so I don't walk past a coffee shop? And do you get what I mean? Responding in a way of, how can I use this error to correct the system, rather than how do I use this error to corrupt the system? Correction, not corruption. Do you get what I mean? But regardless of that, I think those are like some of my biggest tips to say. I hope this episode was very useful. I will be back. Guys, I feel quite overjoyed. I don't know. I feel like this feels very like it feels like a marrying of what I was trying to do with the newer episodes of Female Genius, but also with the essence and the fun and the chaoticness of the old. And so I really hope this episode served its purpose, and maybe you walked away and being like, this is a bunch of dumb shit. And that's okay. But I hope you took away something, even if it's a fun story, or is it, I need to go see Rock Lee scrap, because clearly I need to see what a ninja's doing in a world full of magicians. I don't know, whatever it is, but regardless, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I will be back next week. I promise. I'm not lying this time. Me coming back 2 months later. Hi, guys. But I will be back with another episode, cozy, amazing, fun, informative, hopefully very inspiring episode of the Female Genius podcast. Bye, guys.